Hey guys, tonight we begin beneath a velvet night sky, just as the first breeze of desert cold begins to whisper across the dunes. You're standing at the edge of the Sahara, where the land glows softly under a swollen moon. Ahead, a trail of camels shuffles patiently, each groaning under a load that's deceptively simple, rectangular slabs of rock salt strapped tight with fraying cords. The air smells of leather, dust, and distant fire smoke. You squint into the dark and feel it in your bones. This isn't just a trade route, it's a lifeline, a pulse beating through history's longest empire. And, let's be honest, you probably wouldn't survive this. Not with the blisters, not with the thirst, not with the lurking threat of bandits, mirages, and camel burps that smell like fermented nightmares. Still, here you are, adjusting your turban, pretending you're not worried about the sound you just heard behind that dune. Welcome to Mali, baby. Hope you like your history sun-dried and lightly salted. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Drop it in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge forward, your feet crunching the cracked earth. Somewhere behind you, a young boy laughs too loud and gets shushed by an older trader. One of those types who claims he's crossed the Sahara 32 times. Never lost a camel, not even once. His voice drips with pride. But you've already heard whispers around campfires. He definitely lost one, maybe two. And a whole crate of cinnamon that was definitely not his. The salt slabs you're helping to carry came from a place you haven't seen yet. Taghaza, far to the north, where men mine pure salt from the earth like stone treasure. You run your fingers along the edge of one of the slabs. It's rough, greyish-white, slightly greasy, and if you sneak a lick, yep, just as salty as it looks. This stuff? This is gold. Maybe better than gold? Gold won't keep your stew from rotting, it won't stop your muscles from cramping, and it sure won't earn you the goodwill of every market woman from Timbuktu to Gao. Salt is survival, status, and sometimes currency. You pass a camel whose eyes look older than time. Its breath fogs in the air. These animals aren't just transportation, they're storage, scouts, and occasionally your pillow. The clinking sound of their gear and the low rumble of hooves form a rhythm you'll soon find hypnotic. Left, right, salt, gold, step, wind, sand. Repeat. Historians still argue whether Mali's salt trade was more vital than its gold production. But tonight, as the caravan snakes forward like a sandy serpent under a star-spangled sky, it's clear. Salt moved people. Empires followed its trails, and Mali, poised like a giant between the deserts of the north and the green gold of the south, became the middleman of legend. The wind picks up. You shield your face as a fine powder of sand dances across your cheeks. The older traders wear goggles made from cloth slits and camel bone, a Saharan fashion tip you're learning the hard way. Somewhere in the caravan, a griot, one of Mali's oral historians, begins to hum a tune that's older than your great-grandmother's great-grandmother. It tells of Sundiata Keita, the Lion King of Mali, whose birth was foretold by spirits, and whose empire was salted at its roots. The lyrics change slightly every time, depending on the region, the singer, or the weather. Tonight, the version includes a crocodile who demands payment in peppercorns. You smile, or maybe you're grimacing, hard to tell in this dry wind. By morning, your feet are numb, your water skin's half empty, and your sense of time has melted into the sunrise. The dunes ahead glow like powdered gold. You think of what lies beyond, the salty cities, the sacred rivers, the rustling markets. But first, rest. One of the traders has jabbed a stick into the ground, marking a familiar spot. The camels groan to a halt, kneeling one by one with heavy sighs. You drop your load, carefully so it doesn't shatter, and flop onto the warm sand. Your spine pops like a drumbeat. A young girl hands you a bowl of millet and dried dates, lightly dusted, with salt. Of course, someone nearby offers you a strange salty tea. You sip. It's bitter. You ask why they drink this stuff. Reminds us, the woman replies, of where we are and where we're going. Salt has a way of doing that. It preserves memory. It tightens the taste of history. Before you fall asleep under a tattered wool blanket, you overhear the old trader again. He's whispering to another, "Did I ever tell you about the time we lost half the caravan to a sandstorm, only to be saved by a goat? You already know you're going to hear the whole tale, probably more than once. But for now, the sky's turning indigo, the camels are settling, and the salt waits silently beside you, as it always has, unchanged, indispensable, and a little bit smug. Dawn creeps over the horizon like a slow, silent spill of honey. You wake to the braying of camels and the snap of kindling. Someone's brewing another pot of that face-twistingly salty tea. Your limbs protest as you sit up, sand clinging to everything. You stretch your arms and watch the caravan shake off the night. Salt slabs are retied, water skins checked, and for a moment the entire group moves like a single practiced creature. The next destination murmured along the caravan's length is Taghaza, a name that sticks in the throat like the grit between your teeth. And soon, you'll see why. After hours of trudging through featureless dunes, you spot it. At first, it looks like a trick of the heat, but no. A scattering of low, pale structures emerges ahead. Square, squat, windowless, and glittering faintly. These aren't ordinary buildings. These are salt houses. Every single wall, brick and block here is made of salt. Welcome to Taghaza, the salty skeleton of an empire. You walk through the eerily quiet settlement. The salt crunches beneath your sandals with each step. There's no green, no running water, no birdsong. Just the wind and the sound of miners chipping away at the earth, lifting chunks of crystalline salt like harvesters reaping their ghostly crop. A man waves at you from a pit, his teeth caked with grey dust, his hair wrapped tightly against the wind. He gestures toward the mine and grins. Want to see what an empire's bones look like? Taghaza is both a miracle and a nightmare. This outpost survives solely on salt and the caravans that come for it. The workers, often enslaved or indebted men, toiling in blazing heat, shoveling shimmering slabs from brine-crusted pits. You peer into one of the mines. It's deeper than it looks, like a wound cut straight into the desert's skin. Despite its bleakness, this place was a cornerstone of the Malian economy. Salt mined here travelled hundreds of miles southward, and was sometimes exchanged weight for weight with gold. Historians still argue whether this economy was sustainable, or whether Mali's dependence on this fragile, sunburnt supply chain hastened its decline. You notice something strange about the buildings. They're melting. Not fast, but unmistakably, like candles left in the sun. Without constant maintenance, entire homes here slump into themselves, and so, new salt blocks are carved and slotted in like oversized puzzle pieces day after day. It's as if Taghaza is slowly trying to eat itself. Some say the town was never truly alive, just a ghost depot clinging to relevance. Others insist it was a beating heart. Small, yes, but vital, like the one vein that keeps the whole body going. It was mentioned in Ibn Battuta's journals too, and not kindly. He described it as wretched and uninhabitable, which, judging by the way your nostrils sting from the salt wind, feels fair. You pass a market square, if it can be called that. A few makeshift awnings cling to poles. Beneath them, piles of salt bricks, bundles of camel dung used as fuel, and the occasional flask of water sold at prices that would make your modern bank account weep. One man tries to sell you a blessed salt brick said to keep away jinn. You smile politely and back away slowly. You overhear a trader joking that Taghaza salt tastes like fear. Another swears that licking the mine walls will bring you visions. You decide not to test either claim. The local food is as grey and dry as the town itself. Floury cakes stiffened with salt, chewy goat strips you're not convinced are still goat, and fermented camel milk so sour it makes your eyes water. Still, everyone here eats with the steady rhythm of people who know the cost of waste. What makes Taghaza truly bizarre, though, is how much power it held. This ruinous pit, where the sun burns so hot that metal warps in your hand, was once a keystone of trade diplomacy. Leaders in Mali and beyond depended on these salt slabs to preserve meat, flavour grain, and, most importantly, buy loyalty. It wasn't just the miners and traders who profited. Chiefs, kings, religious leaders, they all got a cut. You picture Mansa Musa, robe glittering like starlight, standing in Timbuktu and nodding solemnly as a caravan from Taghaza delivers his cut. Salt may not sparkle, but in the right light, it commands more power than a gem. You find a wall near the edge of town, its bricks weathered but still standing. Carved into one are strange markings. Not Arabic, not local script. Just a rough pictograph of a man beside a camel, beneath a sun and holding a block of salt. No one knows who etched it there. Maybe a miner, maybe a trader marking the spot of a deal gone well, or terribly wrong. That's the thing about Taghaza. It isn't built to last, and yet it has outlasted kings, empires, and sandstorms. It's not supposed to exist, and yet it refuses not to. As the sun dips lower, the caravan prepares to move on. You gather your things, now covered in a fine salt dust, and step carefully back toward the trail. One last look over your shoulder shows a town gleaming faintly, like bone under skin, a reminder that even in the emptiest places, value is where you least expect it. A young boy throws one last salt chunk into his satchel and whispers, "For my mother's stew," you nod. Good call. That stew probably needs all the help it can get. You mount back onto your camel, sore and sun-bitten. Behind you, Taghaza begins to shrink, shrinking into the sand like a memory too stubborn to fade. The caravan moves again. The desert stretches ahead like a sigh, wide, breathless, infinite. You're starting to understand why the Tuareg call it Tinaruwen, the empty lands. The wind picks up, whispering secrets across the dunes. It's a long road ahead, but at least now you've settled into the rhythm of the caravan. Step, step, sway, clink. Camels groan like grumpy baritones. Their legs move like machinery, smooth and oddly graceful, if you ignore the sounds coming from their insides. You ride high on one's back, swaddled in cloth and stubbornness, your legs straining to adapt to the side-to-side roll. It's not a ride, it's a negotiation, and you're definitely losing. Camels are weird. Let's just say it. Their eyelashes are longer than your patience. Their nostrils close in a sandstorm. Their feet, soft and wide like marshmallows, don't sink in the sand the way yours do. And despite their dramatic attitude, they are the undisputed kings of desert travel. You, however, feel like a sack of grain slowly learning humility. The caravan's pace is deliberate, about 3 miles per hour. That's about the speed of a determined toddler, and yet it's fast enough to cover vast distances over time. These camel trains can stretch for miles, especially during peak seasons. Some were hundreds of animals long, a grand procession of humps, hooves, and halters. You pass a cluster of bones, sun-bleached and scattered, likely an old pack animal who gave up the ghost mid-journey. Someone's tied a strip of cloth to a nearby shrub, a marker, a memory, or maybe just a warning. Don't stop too long. The desert waits for no one. You talk to a fellow traveller. His name is Bakari. He's a seasoned handler, the kind who can coax a camel into kneeling with nothing but a twitch of his eyebrow. He offers you dried dates from his pouch and tells you with a wink that his oldest camel understands insults in 3 languages. Salt, he says between bites, makes kings, but camels, they keep kings alive. He's not wrong. Without camels, the salt trade would have died on the vine. No horse, no ox, no cart can handle these dunes the way camels do. They go without water for days. They carry hundreds of pounds. They spit with astonishing accuracy. The ancient Berbers called them God's gift to the sand. Historians still argue whether camels were first domesticated in Arabia or North Africa. But one thing is clear. Once they entered the trans-Saharan scene, trade exploded. Salt from the north, gold from the south, ideas, languages and cultures riding back and forth atop gangly burping beasts. You take note of the gear. Saddlebags made of woven goat hair, bells to keep track of each camel, even little charms against the evil eye. The caravans are like mobile villages complete with disputes, songs and gossip. Someone a few camels over swears they saw a star fall last night. A trader in front of you says he dreamed of a crocodile walking on 2 legs. Definitely a bad omen, or a weird stew. As the sun climbs higher, the heat becomes unbearable. You swaddle your face tighter. Every inch of exposed skin starts to sting. It's the kind of heat that makes you question every life choice that led you here. You think about modern air conditioning and weep quietly inside. But then, you spot it. A mirage? No. A real shimmer on the horizon. A temporary rest stop. It's nothing grand, just a cluster of tents, a few scrappy camels tied up, a fire pit with someone boiling tea that smells like mint and dust. But it's enough. You dismount like an amateur, awkwardly with one foot catching and the other cramping, and collapse beside the fire. Bakari tosses you a canteen. You take one careful sip. The water tastes like metal and old leather, but it's the best thing you've ever tasted. A young girl pours you tea, 3 tiny cups served in stages, bitter, strong, sweet. The Tuareg call this ritual the 3 kisses. You sip slowly. Your fingers tremble slightly, not from fear, but from the strange vibrating exhaustion that only the desert can give. There's time to rest now, so you watch. The camels kneel and huff. The traders repair sandals with strips of hide. One man carefully rewraps his salt bricks in leather to keep them from crumbling. Another checks a map etched onto goat parchment. More art than science, really. But it's all he needs. The routes are old, passed down by memory. Landmarks include trees that haven't existed in a century, rocks shaped like old men, and the bones of unlucky caravans. You ask if there are bandits. Bakari just chuckles. There are, but not the way you think. You don't ask again. Instead, you watch as the caravan prepares to move. You're not in a hurry. No one is. The desert doesn't like speed, but it respects rhythm. You take a moment to look at your camel. She's not pretty exactly, but she's reliable. She grunts as you approach, maybe affectionately, maybe not. You're starting to understand her language. A fringe detail catches your attention. Some traders carry small pouches of salt dyed red with ochre. Supposedly it brings good fortune, or maybe it's just easier to spot if it falls. One man swears red salt wards off desert spirits. Another says it helps with camel constipation. You decide not to look too closely. The heat fades slightly as the sun starts its slow descent. Shadows stretch across the dunes like sleeping giants. The caravan moves again, and you with it, falling back into the sway and thrum of movement. You realise something strange. The rhythm isn't just physical, it's mental, spiritual even. The monotony of the desert, the silence between camel grunts, it does something to your brain. Time loses meaning. The past and present melt together. You think about ancient traders walking this exact trail 1,000 years ago. You wonder if they were also cursing their saddle sores. Salt may be the cargo, but the true trade is something deeper. Motion, memory, momentum. And as the stars begin to blink awake above you, you fall into step, into history, into rhythm. Night falls again, smooth as silk and just as deceptive. The wind hums low across the dunes, curling around the caravan like a purring cat made of cold air and ghost stories. You're used to it now, the muffled thud of camel hooves, the soft chime of copper bells swinging from leather straps. But as the sun rises, golden and blinding, the sound changes. Water. Distant but real. A new scent in the air. Wet clay, papyrus, life. You've reached the banks of the Niger River, Mali's beating heart. It emerges like a miracle, silver blue and slow-moving, coiling through the Sahel like a ribbon dropped by the gods. After endless dunes and mirages, the river feels like a hallucination, only colder and more generous. The caravan halts near Gao, one of the oldest cities in West Africa, and for a moment, the contrast is overwhelming. From salt flats to riverbanks, from parched winds to humid air that clings to your skin, the city hums with life. Traders unloading bundles, fishmongers barking prices, the slap of woven mats drying in the sun. Children dart past your camel laughing, their feet kicking up dust and fish scales in equal measure. You dismount, knees buckling slightly, and follow the salt handlers toward a low mud brick building marked with saffron paint. Here, salt is weighed, cut, and sometimes shaved into smaller bricks. A man scrapes a slab into fine dust, careful not to waste a grain. Every flake is precious, every particle, profit. Historians still argue whether Gao or Timbuktu held more sway in the salt economy, but one thing's certain, Gao had the river. And the river meant fish, markets, gardens, and access. Salt from Taghaza came south by camel, but from here it flowed downriver in shallow boats carved from tree trunks, moving through Mali like blood through veins. You watch one of these boats now, low, broad, and oddly elegant, pushed along with a long pole by a boy who can't be more than 10. His cargo? Salt. Of course. He sings to himself as he works, a lilting tune about a crocodile who stole a bride. You're starting to think the crocodiles in Malian folklore have PR issues. Beside the river, a group of men pray in long rows, their faces turned east, their feet touching the earth. Salt sellers wait patiently beside them, not because they're religious, though many are, but because deals made in haste never last. That's one of the unspoken rules of Gao. Everything has its rhythm. You wander into the market district, eyes wide. There's salt here, sure, but also baskets of dried fish, slabs of gold wrapped in cloth, and intricately carved charms sold by a woman who claims she can curse your enemies with nothing but a pebble and a whisper. You believe her, mostly because she hasn't blinked in 5 minutes. Gao was once the capital of the Songhai Empire, before Mali swallowed it whole for a time. The walls here aren't grand, but the culture is. You see Arabic script carved into stone and hear 5 languages in one conversation. Some of the traders wear robes dyed with indigo so deep it stains their hands blue. Others carry ledgers, actual books, recording trades, prices, even dreams. One entry just reads, "Salt too dry today. Wait for cloud." You sit on the riverbank with a trader named Seydu, who chews on salted fish and flicks pebbles into the water. "Salt?" he says. "It's not just food. It's promise. It's memory." You ask what he means. He shrugs. You taste it, and you know, you remember, the sea, the sweat, the trade, the dead, the living. He hands you a fish. You take a bite. It's sharp, pungent, preserved to survive months in the heat. Your teeth hurt a little. Your soul wakes up a lot. You hear drums in the distance, probably a griot ceremony. Somewhere, someone's telling the old stories of Mansa Musa, who once passed through Gao with an entourage so huge that the entire riverfront had to be cleared, of warriors who salted their wounds and rode into battle with red cloth tied to their spears, of storms that chased caravans all the way from Taghaza to here and back again. You catch sight of one of the city's oldest structures, the Tomb of Askia, a giant earthen pyramid-like tower built in the late 15th century. Locals say it was constructed with both mud and salt water. Whether that's true or not, the structure seems to glisten faintly under the sun. Maybe it's just the heat haze. Maybe it's history shining through. There's a fringe detail you notice as you pass a nearby courtyard. Small pots of salted clay set out to dry, used by some herbalists for treating wounds and fevers. Salt isn't just economic here, it's medicinal, spiritual, cultural. Babies are sometimes rubbed with a salt paste to bless their bones. Salt lines are drawn around sickbeds. You step over one carefully. A boy runs past you shouting something about a crocodile in the river. Again. You look up in time to see a ripple near the far bank. It could be anything. A fish, a log, or one of Mali's many old spirits, checking in on the trade route it used to haunt. You smile and move on. By evening, Gao quiets. The traders light lanterns. The boats moor along the muddy banks. A woman stirs a pot of fish stew over a charcoal fire, tossing in a handful of, you guessed it, salt. She offers you some. You try to say no. You fail. Again. And as you lie back, belly full and head spinning, you watch the river flow in the moonlight. Slow, steady, unstoppable, like the salt that brought you here. You wake before dawn to the sound of drumming, soft, insistent, rhythmic. Not the alarm kind, the ancient kind. The kind that says something sacred is beginning. The market is stirring again. You stretch beneath your blanket of rough wool, stiff from river mist and dust. The air smells like fish, charcoal and sweat. A little gross, a little nostalgic. You rub your eyes, and there they are. The griots, Mali's oral historians wrapped in indigo robes, their voices already humming the day's stories into being. One of them gestures for you to come closer. You sit by the fire as his fingers dance across the strings of a kora, a 21-string harp lute made from a calabash gourd. Its notes float like mist, light but sharp. The griot begins to sing, not just any tune, but a story, a legacy. You don't understand every word, but the emotion cuts clean. Joy, sorrow, caution, pride. It's a song about gold and salt, about betrayal between brothers, about a promise made under moonlight and broken by morning. You lean in, eyes wide. There's a line about salt stolen from a tomb, cursed to forever taste like ash. Definitely a fringe detail, possibly made up. You love it anyway. The song shifts, and now it's about Sundiata Keita, the lion-born founder of the Mali Empire. You picture him riding across a sea of sand, salt in his saddlebag and destiny in his teeth. According to the griot, Sundiata's salt came not from Taghaza, but from a hidden spring, guarded by a blind lizard who only sang on Tuesdays. You raise your eyebrow. The griot just smirks. Historians still argue whether Sundiata's rise was mostly military genius or mostly myth. But here, at this fire, the details don't matter. The story is the truth. The salt in the tail carries just as much weight as the salt on your back. The griot stops playing, bows slightly, and hands you a small leather pouch. Inside, a pinch of finely ground salt and a flake of dried gold leaf. Symbolic, of course, but it hits you. This is the exchange. Not just goods, but memory for memory. Later that morning, you wander through the heart of the city. Gao has begun to simmer. Merchants shout over each other. Fabrics in sunset, shades flutter on poles. A pair of camels argues loudly if such a thing is possible, and at the centre of it all, two young griots sit cross-legged on woven mats, surrounded by wide-eyed children. They're reciting another salt tale, this one about a gold thief who disguised himself as a salt merchant, but was undone when he forgot the taste. You grin. Salt has a way of exposing the truth. You step into a modest clay building with scrolls wrapped in leather tucked into every crevice. It's not a library exactly, more like a house of stories. One elder allows you to unroll a scroll and see the calligraphy inside. It's in Arabic, of course, but also marked with personal symbols, musical notations, clan crests, even weather reports from long-gone traders. You spot a line that reads, "Salt passed this way, so did sorrow." You ask the elder if it's a poem or a record. He replies, "Both." You leave feeling slightly haunted. As the sun climbs higher, you find yourself near a temporary caravan camp. Traders are preparing to leave again, loading up camels, checking straps, brushing dust off their wares with palm fans. One man pauses to sprinkle a bit of powdered salt into a leather pouch before tying it tight and placing it beneath his shirt. "For luck," he says, "and for home." Another trader tells you how he paid his bride price in part with salt. Not gold, not livestock. Salt. You blink. "Gold feeds the eye," he says, "but salt feeds the belly." It's true. Across Mali, especially in earlier centuries, salt was sometimes more valuable than gold. Not just because it preserved food, but because it preserved life. Trade, alliances, even peace treaties were salted, sometimes literally. As you help tighten a camel's saddle strap, you hear a song rising again from somewhere behind you. The griot's voice, riding the wind. It's a lullaby, but also a warning. Something about salt turning sour if it's stolen, or if it's forgotten. You're not sure, but you find yourself humming it under your breath. You glance at the horizon. Beyond it lies Timbuktu, the next jewel of your journey. You've heard stories about scholars who read stars, about markets where you can buy 3 languages for the price of a fish, about libraries that smell like ink and dust and secrets. But tonight, the caravan will rest here. One more night on the banks of the Niger, cradled between trade and tale. You sit beneath a tree with a bowl of couscous heavily salted. Around you, men laugh, argue, make plans for futures that may never come. One draws a map in the dirt with his finger, his own secret trade route, filled with fake towns and exaggerated dangers, just in case someone's listening. You add a fake volcano to his map, just for fun. He nods in approval. Salt, it seems, makes jokers of even the weariest travellers. As stars prick the sky and the drums begin again, you realise something. The story never really ends. It just gets handed off, like salt, like song, like stories pressed into scrolls and strapped to camels, and tonight, that story belongs to you. The morning sun creeps over the horizon like a gold coin melting into the sky. The caravan is already in motion, camels kneeling, groaning, traders stretching stiff legs and wrapping scarves tightly around sunburnt faces. Today's march is heavier. You can feel it in the air, in the careful way people speak less and glance more. Something important lies ahead. You're approaching Timbuktu. The name alone sounds mythical, like it belongs in a children's bedtime story or a pirate's treasure map. But it's real. Very real. And as the shimmering outline of the city rises on the horizon, you realise you're about to walk into a place where gold was common, salt was sacred, and books, yes, books, were the crown jewels of empire. The entrance is humbler than you expect. No towering stone gates or flags flapping in the wind. Just winding dirt paths, clusters of adobe buildings, and a steady stream of traders coming and going like ants around a dropped sweet. But don't let the dust fool you. This is one of the intellectual capitals of the medieval world. Timbuktu wasn't just a trade hub. It was a university city, a centre of Islamic scholarship, a dusty library with streets. The locals sometimes say, gold came to Timbuktu for weighing, but it stayed for reading. You follow the caravan to the central market square. Camels are unloaded with the grace of a practiced dance. Salt slabs, still dusty from the Taghaza mines, are stacked high. You can practically hear the value clinking in the air. This is wealth in cubic form. Historians still argue whether Timbuktu's golden age peaked during the Mali Empire or under the later Songhai rulers, but what no one doubts is this. Timbuktu was a jewel, and salt helped polish it. You're led through narrow alleys to the famed Sankore Madrasa, one of the city's most celebrated centres of learning. You enter a cool, shadowed courtyard where students sit cross-legged on woven mats, reciting verses and debating theology, astronomy, and, economics. One tutor holds up a salt slab and begins a lecture on trade routes. You sneak closer. The salt from Taghaza, he says, is not simply for food. It is for preservation, of meat, of bodies, of knowledge. He nods toward a student carrying a leather-bound manuscript. This book, this ink, this page, paid for in salt. You walk through the madrasa's side rooms, really just nooks carved into thick mud walls, where scrolls and books are stacked like treasure. The air smells of parchment, goat hide, and age. Some texts are wrapped tightly in cloth to guard against dust. Others are open, their calligraphy looping like vines. There are works on medicine, astronomy, grammar, law. You brush your fingers over a margin note and realise you're touching the handwriting of someone who lived 700 years ago. One scholar shows you a particularly rare document, a treatise on trade ethics that includes a section on not tampering with salt weights. It even has a drawing of a trader getting smacked with a sandal. You raise your eyebrows. The scholar shrugs. Justice, he says. There's something strange and beautiful about this place. Salt pays for books. Books explain salt. And in between, whole generations are raised on knowledge built from dust and discipline. Outside the library, a group of children play a game involving small rocks and much shouting. One boy uses a tiny piece of salt as a lucky stone. You smile, remembering how, even as empires rose and fell, the simple act of playing never changed. A woman waves you over to her stall. She sells spices wrapped in cloth, cumin, coriander, dried ginger, and tiny jars of a salt paste used to rub into meat and occasionally feet. She claims it cures both hunger and heartbreak. You buy one. Can't hurt. As you eat lunch, a stew of millet, goat, and yes, that same salt paste, you overhear a debate nearby. Two men, animated, passionate, arguing whether salt from Taghaza is purer than salt from the Bilma mines to the east. You listen as they quote ancient travellers, griots, even local proverbs. Eventually one slams down a spoon and says, "Fine, we'll settle it by taste test." This does not happen. But you admire the energy. Not all of Timbuktu's beauty lies in its wisdom, though. You walk past buildings with wooden support beams sticking out like decorative ribs, unique to Sahelian architecture. Their shadows fall long on the sand. You pass a mosque where the minaret is built entirely from sun-baked mud and reinforced with palm sticks, and it somehow radiates grandeur without gold or stone. The fringe details are everywhere. A boy with a tray of candied dates dusted in salt and pepper. A woman with a scarf embroidered with symbols, each one representing a trade route her ancestors once travelled. A bundle of scrolls tied with blue twine because blue keeps the bad spirits out. Or maybe it's just what they had. Hard to say. And then there's the silence. Not literal silence. The city is noisy, alive, buzzing. But there's a stillness under it all. A sense that knowledge is resting here, like a lion in the shade, not needing to roar to be known. As the sun dips, the call to prayer floats above the rooftops. You climb a low wall and look out over Timbuktu. The river shimmers in the distance. The streets glow amber. You feel the weight of centuries humming beneath your feet. Salt brought you here. Salt built this city. But books gave it soul. You lay your blanket out beneath an overhang and watch the stars prick the sky. A griot somewhere is singing softly, the tune carried just enough by the breeze for you to catch a word or two. Salt, memory, wisdom. You close your eyes, cradled by history, lulled by the city of books and brine. The morning begins not with noise but with the rustle of pages. You wake in the same quiet corner of Timbuktu, wrapped in your blanket and surrounded by the low murmur of a city not quite ready to open its eyes. Before the clang of camels and clatter of trade resumes, there's something else in the air. Ink, parchment, knowledge. You find yourself drawn again to the library district, the cluster of mud-walled buildings housing one of the greatest manuscript collections in Africa. Some are private family libraries, others preserved public archives, none of them flashy, all of them priceless. The door creaks as you enter one of the buildings and the air changes immediately. It's cooler, dustier, reverent, like stepping into a temple. A scholar welcomes you with a nod. His robe is faded indigo, his fingers stained with ink. He unwraps a scroll with the precision of someone handling a sleeping cobra. Inside, a manuscript about trade routes, astronomy, and agriculture, all intertwined like threads in a cloth. Salt appears repeatedly, marked in margins, used in analogies, even listed as a taxable good for scholars. Apparently, bookmen had to eat too. You lean over and read a line. He who controls the salt controls the stars. Poetic? Absolutely. Practical? In medieval Mali? Arguably yes. You ask the scholar where the salt came from to fund these libraries. He smiles, as if that's the whole point. Salt funded everything. He points to the ceiling beams, paid for in salt, the ink ingredients carried on salt caravans, the scholars' stipends, the sand to polish parchment, the guards at the gates. Even the city's famous Quranic schools were once financed by salt-backed taxes. You stare around you, stunned. The books aren't just filled with salt, they're written on it. Historians still argue how many manuscripts Timbuktu once held. Estimates range from tens of thousands to over 700,000, but the exact number doesn't matter. What matters is that they existed. And they weren't just religious tracts either. These were documents on mathematics, medicine, linguistics, jurisprudence, even local histories, jokes, and dream interpretations. You stumble upon one volume no bigger than your palm. The writing is microscopic, the cover soft with wear. The scholar calls it a pocket guide to camel first aid. You raise your eyebrows. He nods solemnly. Very important in the dry season. Another document, more fragile than a whisper, includes a dream diary from a salt merchant, complete with illustrations, one of a camel with wings, another of a talking salt brick. You don't know whether to laugh or cry. Maybe both. The scholar lets you handle one scroll under strict supervision. The vellum is soft, nearly translucent, written in Arabic with a side commentary in Songhai script. It outlines a historical debate about the ethics of taxing salt transported across river tributaries. Apparently there were heated arguments. Someone was exiled. Someone else was mildly cursed. Bureaucracy has always been spicy. You leave the library blinking in the daylight, the weight of knowledge settling in your chest. Outside, the city is stirring now. Salt traders setting up stalls, students shuffling toward classes, scribes already hard at work transcribing yesterday's lessons. One young boy jogs past holding a scroll under one arm and a salt brick in the other. Balance, you think. That's the Mali way. You pass a stall selling manuscript restoration tools, small brushes, goat leather covers, beeswax polish. One woman sells charcoal-based ink mixed with salt water, claiming it preserves the text longer. You ask if it works. She shrugs. Everything's better with a little salt. You follow a narrow alley to the back of another madrasa, where a group of children sit in a semicircle around a teacher who's reading aloud from a scroll. He pauses now and then to ask questions, and the kids shout answers, sometimes correctly, sometimes not. One girl insists the earth is a giant salt bowl. The teacher sighs but doesn't correct her. You linger long enough to hear the end of the lesson. It's a poem, about caravans and stars and scholars who rode camels by moonlight, reading maps made of memory and sky. The children recite the last line in unison. Where salt flows, knowledge grows. You're not crying. You're just dehydrated. Probably. As the heat rises, you escape into a shaded courtyard where a griot sits alone with a long-necked instrument across his lap. You recognize him from the previous night, his face half covered with a cloth, eyes twinkling with stories. Without a word, he begins to play. The song is slower this time, gentle, almost a lullaby. It tells of a scholar who memorized 10,000 verses and paid his teacher in salt, of a woman who wrote poetry in the margins of ledgers, of a scroll that told the future but was lost in a flood of spilled ink and rainwater. You close your eyes and listen, the tune wrapping around you like an old blanket. The music ends, and the griot offers a rare smile before standing and walking away, leaving only silence behind. Back in the market, you notice something odd. A man is trading books for salt. Not metaphorically, literally. A trader offers 3 slabs for a manuscript. They haggle a bit, respectfully but firmly, and the deal is struck. The book disappears into the folds of a cloth, the salt added to a growing stack beside a wagon. Later, someone tells you this isn't unusual. Books and salt are both forms of power. One feeds the mind, one feeds the body. When the two meet, empires remember. That evening, you sit atop a low rooftop as the sun bleeds orange across the sky. Below, students study by lamplight. Traders finish their day. Salt slabs are tied and retied with fraying rope. You breathe in the warm air, tinged with smoke, ink, and the ghost of ancient wisdom. Salt built Timbuktu, but its legacy is written in ink, and maybe, just maybe, in you too. Morning creeps in again, this time on the back of laughter and clattering pots. You stretch under your worn blanket as the city of Timbuktu begins to hum. Vendors calling out their goods, donkeys braying somewhere down an alley, the rhythmic slap of dough being patted flat for breakfast. The caravan's staying one more day, which means you have time to wander, listen, and maybe get into a little trouble. Soft, salt-related trouble. The best kind. You head toward the market, where the pulse of the city beats hardest. It's a sprawling maze of stalls and mats and shade awnings patched with every kind of cloth imaginable. The smell is complex. Salt, obviously, but also cumin, dates, boiled fish, damp wood, camel sweat, and a very bold kind of cheese you try not to look directly at. You pause near a woman arranging piles of salt slabs like bricks, some grey, some nearly white, a few even streaked pink from a distant mine in the east. Each has a price. Each could buy something different. A handful of cloves, a bolt of cloth, half a goat, a promise. A man nearby is arguing over a transaction. Not about gold, not even about fish. He's trying to buy a wife with salt. You sidle closer, pretending to examine a pot of dried hibiscus petals. Eavesdropping is a moral grey zone, but you're practically a historian now, so permission granted. The discussion is animated but polite. The bride's family wants more salt, 6 bricks minimum. The groom offers 4 and a future camel. Someone brings up a cousin's wedding that only cost 2 bricks and a very loud chicken. Eventually they agree, a dowry of 5 bricks and 1 embroidered tunic. The deal is sealed with handshakes and the slicing of a dried fig. Salt, it seems, can buy spices, silks, livestock, housing materials and marriages. It's both deeply practical and profoundly symbolic. Salt doesn't just flavour, it binds, it stabilises, and when used this way, it almost feels like a blessing. You pass a group of women seated on low stools, grinding dried peppers and mixing them with crushed salt to make a red-hot seasoning paste that could wake the dead. One offers you a taste on the tip of her knife. You cry politely. A griot strolls past, singing a new tune. This one's about a jealous merchant who salted his rival's grain sacks to ruin the flavour. The revenge was poetic. The rival married his daughter and demanded 10 salt bricks as dowry. Irony. Thy name is seasoning. Historians still argue whether salt was truly considered currency in medieval Mali, or simply a high-value commodity. But here, on the ground, watching a man offer 3 salt bricks for a sturdy cooking pot, the line feels blurry. You don't need minted coins when everyone understands the worth of what's in your hands. You duck into a shaded stall where a tailor is stitching silver thread into cloth the colour of sunrise. She explains that some robes have salt dust rubbed into them before they're worn to bless the threads and help preserve the dye. You imagine walking around smelling like cured meat and prestige. Not bad. Then, just beyond the main market, you find a quieter corner, the animal trade zone. Here, salt is used for buying horses. Not just any horses. Tall, muscular desert steeds with wide nostrils and the kind of patience only war animals can have. You watch as a trader weighs 2 salt bricks carefully, then hands them over to claim a pale grey horse with eyes that look like they've seen empires rise and fall. Next to the horses, Camels. Of course. An old man with no teeth tells you he once traded 6 salt bricks and a broken drum for a camel who turned out to be the smartest idiot I ever met. You want to ask follow-up questions, but he's already asleep. As you weave through the market's edges, you start noticing salt amulets, small pouches worn around necks, hanging from donkeys, even tied to tent poles. Each one holds a pinch of salt and a slip of paper or leather with a prayer. Some are for health, some for fertility. Some just say, "Keep the flies off." You buy one for yourself. You don't even ask what it's for. It just feels right. That afternoon, as the sun scorches overhead and the city naps in the shade, you find shelter beneath a woven awning. A merchant offers you spiced tea and explains how salt isn't just traded. It's stored, gifted, and inherited. One salt slab in his house has been in his family for 4 generations. No one's allowed to use it. It just sits in the corner, watching, honoured. You nod solemnly, as if this isn't a deeply intimidating concept. As the day cools and the market roars back to life, you hear someone calling your name. It's Bakary, the caravan handler with the multilingual camel. He's bought you a present, a small pinch of blue salt, rare and expensive, meant to bring clarity of thought. Maybe it'll help with your storytelling, he jokes. You pretend to be offended. Then you pocket the salt and thank him like it's a crown jewel. Evening falls with lanterns flickering in the market stalls and the sizzle of food frying in wide pans. You buy a simple dinner of fried plantain and goat stew and eat while watching 2 children argue about whether salt comes from the sea or from camel spit. Both are technically wrong. Both are also sort of right. Before bed, you wander back past the salt stalls. Most are closed now, their owners dozing or counting bricks like coin. But one is still open. A woman sits alone, surrounded by a circle of glowing coals, shaping salt into tiny animal figurines. Cats, crocodiles, camels, even a lumpy giraffe. You buy a camel, of course. You name him Salty. Back at the camp, you curl up under your blanket, your new salt amulet resting beside you. Salty the figurine tucked into your bag, and a head full of spicy stew, gossip, and dowry negotiations. Salt isn't just flavour here. It's family, friendship, and folklore. And as you drift into sleep, you can still hear the market singing. The stars fade one by one as the caravan pulls away from Timbuktu. You glance back at the city, a blur of earthen walls and quiet minarets melting into the morning haze. The salt you carry feels heavier now, like it's picked up the weight of stories, deals, and dust. A camel behind you groans dramatically, as if protesting another leg of the journey. You get it, buddy. Today you're heading south. But not toward another city. This stretch of the trade route leads into territory more complicated, more layered. You're entering the grey space of commerce, where salt trades hands for not just gold, but also spices, slaves, and secrets. It starts subtly. The caravan stops at a riverside village. Nothing fancy, just a few mud huts, a wooden dock, and a smell of dried fish that hits you like a lesson in humility. Salt bricks are offloaded with practiced ease, stacked beside bundles of cinnamon, cola nuts, and tiny sacks of pepper worth their weight in gossip. You watch a trader measure cloves on a bronze scale, adding 1 flake of salt to balance the deal. He laughs with the spice merchant, then slips something under the table. A nod, a coin, or maybe not a coin. You see a thin wrist vanish into a shadowed doorway. You look away. Salt here is still a symbol of wealth, still a meal saver and meat preserver, but it's also a gatekeeper. In the bustling hubs of trade, salt becomes the ticket to deeper, darker dealings. You move through another village where salt slabs are being stacked next to ropes, iron chains, and heavy wooden yokes, and suddenly it's harder to swallow your breakfast. Historians still argue whether Mali's salt trade fueled the Atlantic slave trade or simply coexisted with it, but in this moment, you see the shadows where the two intersected. You pass a group of captives seated quietly under a tree, guarded but not chained, yet. A woman leans against a salt block as if it's just another rock, but you know better. That salt may be part of the price paid for her journey, or her captivity. A man nearby claims he once traded salt for an entire riverboat, full of spices and people. He says it like someone talking about livestock or millet, not lives. Another says he refused a trade that included bad luck captives and lost half his caravan to illness 2 days later. Superstition, or maybe guilt. Either way, it lingers. A griot travelling with your caravan sings softly that night, near the campfire. about a man who bought his brother with a single salt brick and never slept well again. The others chuckle nervously. You wrap your blanket tighter. Salt doesn't judge. It's just salt. But what people do with it, that's where the history bites. The next village you reach is smaller, quieter. A woman offers you a bowl of stew with salted duck and bitter greens. You thank her and sit beside an old man who tells you that his grandfather was bought out of bondage with 2 salt bricks and a horse's saddle. You nod. He nods. The story hangs between you like incense smoke, heavy, fragrant, and impossible to ignore. Later, as the caravan passes a wide plain, you see the remnants of an old trading station. Collapsed walls, stone markers, fire pits. A camel bone sticking out of the ground like a warning. Bakari, your ever-wise handler, says this place used to be a bustling midpoint for slave caravans and spice routes, until a rebellion burned it down. Salt funded both sides, he adds with a shrug. That's the joke. You keep walking. At another rest stop, a woman hands you a charm made of woven reeds and tied with salt-dusted twine. For safe passage, she says, and clean trades. You don't ask what she means by clean. You just tie it to your satchel and nod. You notice fringe details that suddenly seem more ominous. Salt wrapped in black cloth instead of white. Talismans with knots that look like restraints. A ledger with codes that clearly mean more than prices. One entry reads, 3 shadows, 2 bricks, no return. You don't want to know. But this is part of the story too. Salt wasn't just a preserver of food. It preserved power, and that meant it touched everything. Kings traded with it. Soldiers were paid with it. And yes, people were trafficked with it. Salt turned hands into fists, contracts into chains. And yet, here in the mud and heat, life keeps going. Children laugh by the river. A group of women kneel beside a flat stone, scrubbing laundry with soap made from salt and ash. A man carves a flute while his son traces salt roots into the dirt. One path leads to Gao, another to Timbuktu. A third, he calls it the path to nowhere. You suspect he knows more than he's letting on. That night, around the fire, someone shares a flatbread sprinkled with salt and pepper. You break off a piece and chew slowly, staring into the flames. Salt doesn't lie, it doesn't preach. It simply is. But the stories it touches, those twist like smoke. Tomorrow, you head into deeper empire territory, bigger cities, bigger trades. But tonight, you're surrounded by whispers, some human, some historical, and all carried on the same thing. A few flakes of crystal pulled from the desert and passed hand to hand, heart to heart, sometimes for better and sometimes not. The desert quiets again. Not the hush of evening prayer or sleeping camels. This is the kind of quiet that presses against your ears, a silence that feels watched. The wind moves strangely, tugging your scarf tighter, and Bakari, who's usually the loudest storyteller at the fire, sits with his back to the dunes, eyes scanning the horizon. He mutters, "Don't talk too loud tonight. Jinn don't like noise." You blink. Wait, what? Jinn. Spirits. Desert tricksters. Some friendly, most not. They live in the winds, the dunes, the abandoned wells, and according to everyone around your campfire, they really don't like salt. Or maybe they love it. That part changes depending on who's telling the story. One trader insists salt repels them, keeps them from slipping into your shadow. Another swears salt attracts jinn like candy to children. That's why you always offer a pinch to the sand before bed, he says, tossing a few grains from his pouch. You hesitate, then do the same. Can't hurt. Welcome to the superstitious side of the salt trail. Tonight you're sleeping in a location whispered about by caravan elders, an old oasis once used as a resting post, now mostly abandoned. The palm trees creak like old bones. The pool is more mud than water, and the well has been sealed with a salt brick and rope netting. That's not a plumbing issue, that's a warning. Someone tells you a story of a man who tried to break the brick, hoping to dig fresh water. Found something else. Didn't walk right after that, they say. You decide your thirst can wait until morning. Historians still argue whether Saharan jinn beliefs were rooted in pre-Islamic traditions, or grew alongside Islam as the empire expanded, but they absolutely shaped how caravans behaved. Salt wasn't just for food, it was for rituals, for defense, for bargaining with the unseen. You ask Bakri if he believes in jinn. He doesn't answer at first, just sips his tea, eyes locked on the glowing coals. Then he says, One time I dropped a salt brick in the sand, tried to find it for hours. Next morning it was sitting on top of my pillow, still tied, still whole. He raises an eyebrow. You tell me. You sleep lightly that night, and in your dreams the sand whispers. By morning the air feels lighter. The jinn, real or imagined, have gone elsewhere. You eat a simple breakfast, flatbread, a smear of goat fat, and a pinch of spiced salt. It's surprisingly good. Food always tastes better after not being possessed. Back on the trail, the caravan passes a strange formation. A salt pillar rising out of the sand like a crooked tooth. No one touches it. Bakari makes a sign with his fingers and spits. It's a marker, an old one, possibly the resting place of a trader who broke a sacred pact. Or maybe it's just a natural formation, but no one investigates. As you move forward, the stories keep coming. One man swears he saw salt melting in moonlight, dripping like candle wax only to harden again by dawn. Another claims he once found a camel hoofprint filled with salt, perfectly preserved. That camel, he says, wasn't from this world. The fringe tales are endless. Cursed salt mines that echo with laughter, slabs that cry when broken, a bandit leader who salted his own boots so he'd never be tracked. It's hard to separate fact from folklore, and at this point, you don't want to. The stories are the landscape now. Later, you reach a well-maintained caravan stop. This one's cheerful, bustling even. Salt bricks are stacked neatly near the camp's edge. Not hidden, not protected, just offered. Travellers add a pinch to a communal pile for safe passage. You contribute your own, watching it disappear into the glimmering mound. There's something oddly comforting about that. As the sun sets, the griots begin a new tale, one that toes the line between myth and memory. It's about a trader who tried to cheat a village by watering down his salt. He mixed in river sand, thinking no one would notice. They noticed. They didn't kill him, though. No. They made him lick every brick in front of the village chief. By the end, he confessed his crime and developed a lifelong respect for seasoning. You laugh, but you glance at your own salt stack. All real. All earned. Salt is practical, yes. It's trade. It's wealth. It's empire. But it's also spiritual, symbolic, a line drawn in the sand between the known and the unknowable. You sleep that night with your satchel zipped tight and your charm tucked under your pillow. The desert may have gin, but it also has you. Salt brick lugging, story-soaked, slightly superstitious you. And as the wind shifts, you think you hear laughter. Soft, friendly, probably. The sun rises on another leg of the journey, and this time the road feels fragile. Not physically, though the sand here is softer, almost powdery, and the camels trudge with more effort. But the fragility is in the mood. The traders talk in hushed tones. Bakari chews his dates slower. Even the bells on the camels jingle more quietly, like they know something's off. You've entered the territory known as Mali's salt arteries, those long winding desert trails that connected Taghaza, Timbuktu, Gao, and countless small stops in between. They seem solid on the map, but up close they're vulnerable. One broken caravan, one missing well, one raid by bandits or sandstorm, and the whole network cracks like a dried fig. You pass a crumbling stone marker, a jagged tooth with faded carvings. Bakari translates, "May your camels walk straight, may your salt be unbroken." Salt was more than a commodity. It was logistics, the lifeblood of an empire held together by fragile lines through shifting dunes. And those lines could break, often did. The caravan slows to a crawl when the lead camel halts. Its handler squints at the sand ahead, pokes it with a stick and frowns. The ground is too smooth. No tracks. That's never good. You learn quickly that Saharan trade routes were never paved roads. They were kept alive by memory, instinct, and patterns of wear. Tiny grooves worn into the desert by centuries of hooves and feet. When a path disappears, it's not just inconvenient, it's dangerous. Historians still argue how long a single salt artery could stay alive before shifting sand buried it, or a rebellion made it unsafe. But no one doubts their delicacy. The empire's power depended on these arteries. Cut one, and the heart starts to fail. As you pause beside the halted caravan, a whisper of wind shifts the sand and reveals a haunting sight. The bones of a camel, ribs rising like claws, a few tattered straps still clinging to its spine. You swallow. Bakari mutters, too old to mourn, too recent to ignore. Repairs begin. Scouts move ahead to find the next leg of the route. You help secure salt bricks tighter, muttering a quiet promise not to drop any. Not here. Not now. Along the path you notice other signs of previous breakdowns. Half-built shelters, never finished, their walls half melted by sun and abandonment. Broken pots, a single shoe, toe curled up like it's still walking. These are the scars of trade gone wrong. At midday you reach an old caravan station that's somehow still operational. The walls are patched with salt bricks and palm fronds. Inside, a trader with a crooked smile sells weatherproof salt bags. You ask what that means. He shrugs. They last until they don't. You buy one anyway. Here you meet a grizzled man named Idrissa who claims he once ran a 500 camel salt caravan through this very route. Not one camel lost, he boasts, though we lost 2 men to boredom. Then he adds, and one to bandits dressed as dancers. You don't ask. He points out a narrow pass through the dunes, explaining that it used to be a key artery, until a local rebellion made it impassable. Tried to tax every brick, he says. Eventually the traders just stopped coming. And just like that, a trade artery died. Not with an explosion, not with a roar, but with a whimper and an alternate route. Empires are vulnerable not just to enemies, but to inconvenience. That night, the griot sings about a queen who tried to hoard salt by blocking all trade through her territory. She built walls, demanded fees, and cursed anyone who passed without paying. Within a year, her city starved. Her own guards fled with the salt. The moral? Salt flows, or it forgets you. As you drift off to sleep wrapped in your cloak, you think about arteries. Those pulsing trails of movement, carrying salt like blood, sustaining cities that never saw the mines, never met the miners. Fragile, invisible highways held together by hoofbeats and hope. And you understand something important. Salt was power, but movement was survival. The wind picks up the next morning, not a gentle breeze, but a steady push that turns sand into sting. You wrap your face tighter, grateful for the extra layer Bakari insisted you add. This, he says, is when the desert starts testing you, and your camels. The caravan trudges forward, slower now, more deliberate. You're heading into contested ground, not the kind marked by battles, but the quieter, tense zones between tribes, where ancient salt routes cross through territories governed by custom, whispers, and a whole lot of honour. Here, salt isn't just cargo, it's a political object. One brick too far left or right could become a declaration of disrespect, or worse, war. You arrive at a modest camp where 3 caravans are already resting under faded cloth tents. There's a noticeable space between them, not quite hostile, but far from friendly. No one's mingling. Camels drink from separate troughs. Traders sip their tea in pairs, eyes darting across invisible borders. Bakari leans in. This place, he says, has rules. He's not joking. You're in a region governed by what locals call the desert laws, an unwritten code of conduct passed from caravan to caravan, tribe to tribe. And the main law, respect the salt and the camel. Violate either, and you're likely to be arguing in front of a makeshift tribunal held under a tent flap with 3 furious elders and no shade. You witness one such incident before you've even had your tea. A young trader is brought forward, accused of disrespecting a camel. The details are fuzzy, something about yelling, a misplaced saddle, and possibly stealing a handful of salt from a sleeping animal's pack. Historians still argue whether these types of disputes were exaggerated by travellers like Ibn Battuta, or if Saharan trade law really was this meticulous. But sitting here, watching this camel court session unfold, you realise something. This is real. The accused stands solemnly, arms crossed. His defence? The camel spit first. A few chuckles ripple through the crowd, but no one smiles. The elders deliberate. Eventually a judgment. The young trader must offer a salt brick in compensation. Plus 2 days of camp chores and a formal apology will roast the camel. You're not sure if the camel understands, but the moment the brick is handed over, the tension breaks. People start talking again. Someone laughs. A kettle whistles. Salt in this case wasn't the problem. It was the solution. You sip your tea quietly and take notes. Later, a visiting dignitary arrives. His robe sharp, his camels well fed, and his entourage visibly uncomfortable about mingling with common traders. He's here on behalf of a distant governor to renegotiate caravan tolls along this stretch of desert. You catch fragments of the meeting, bricks counted, routes debated, threats made in the most polite tones possible. At one point he says, "We could raise the toll by half a brick per camel." The silence that follows is thick. A griot mutters, "Raise the toll, and camels will raise dust somewhere else." It's not a threat, it's logistics. You learn that camels themselves are diplomatic currency. Loaning one is a sign of deep trust, damaging one is grounds for exile. One caravan leader tells you about a time he settled a border dispute by offering a prized white camel in exchange for a salt road reopening. The tribe accepted. 2 years later, they returned the camel, fat, healthy, and tied with blue beads of peace. You meet a trader whose camel wears a necklace of salt beads, carved into delicate shapes, stars, crescents, suns. "She's my daughter's dowry," he explains. You nod solemnly, then try not to stare as the camel burps dramatically and nearly sits on a cooking pot. In the evening, you sit with a group of traders playing a dice game that involves salt tokens. The rules are baffling. Winning seems to involve out-bluffing your opponents, and occasionally telling a joke about a camel with bad eyesight. You lose 6 rounds in a row, but win everyone's respect when you invent a story about a djinn disguised as a salt merchant. One man swears that actually happened to his uncle. Before bed, you help pack one of the newer camels. The handler walks you through the knots, each one precisely tied to distribute weight. A crooked tie could injure the camel. Worse, it might split a salt brick mid-journey. "You don't want to be that guy," he says, patting your shoulder. "The one who dropped half a fortune because he rushed a knot." You practice 3 times. He nods. "Good. Now do it in a sandstorm." You laugh. He doesn't. That night, under the stars, you write down everything. How salt here isn't just a thing you carry. It's a system, a standard of value, a peacekeeper, a point of honor. In the West, people say, break bread to make peace. Here, you share salt, and the taste stays with you. The morning begins without warning. No rooster, no singing, just the thump of salt bricks being loaded, the hiss of boiling tea, and the steady grunt of camels rising like ancient groaning ships from the sand. You're barely awake before you're back in the saddle, swaying gently as the caravan heads east toward a curious ritual. Today, you're going to witness the silent bargaining, an exchange so mysterious and old-fashioned it feels like a myth. But it's real, and it happens not with words, not even with hand signals, but with objects laid out like prayers and answers. The caravan reaches a sun-baked clearing ringed with low rocks. There's no market here, no village, just dust and anticipation. Bakari tells you this is where wordless trade takes place, specifically a ritualized version used when trust is thin or language is absent. Salt for gold. Historians still argue whether these silent trades were primarily done with Ghanaian gold traders, or if this ritual was a wider phenomenon across West Africa. But everyone agrees that for centuries this mute economy helped preserve peace between cultures, even when everything else might have sparked conflict. The traders arranged the salt, perfect slabs, cleaned and squared, placed in rows with tiny flourishes, carved edges, a dab of red dye, a feather tucked in as a personal signature. They step back in unison and wait. Then comes the watching. No one speaks, not even a whisper. Eventually the gold traders arrive, silent as ghosts, faces rapt, eyes scanning. They kneel and inspect the salt, their fingers gentle, almost reverent. Then they place small bags of gold dust beside each brick, not touching, just close enough to mean we accept. They walk away, back to their camels and wait. Your traders return. They inspect the gold. If they're satisfied, they collect it and leave. If not, they leave the bags untouched and the gold traders must sweeten the offer. It's a dance, slow, graceful, ancient, and completely silent. You can feel your heartbeat in your ears, afraid even to shift your weight. The desert watches with you, holding its breath. Eventually the salt handlers nod. The deal is accepted. The traders gather the gold, wrap it carefully, and tie it into their satchels with triple knots, a sign that it came from a silent trade and should not be opened without ceremony. Later, by the campfire, the silence lifts like a fog. Voices return. Laughter returns. Even the camels seem relieved. One handler offers you a chunk of dried meat dipped in powdered salt, and you chew thoughtfully, still turning the ritual over in your mind. You ask Bakari why the trade is done in silence. Because words can start wars, he says, but salt knows peace. He then tells you about a time a greedy trader tried to speak during a silent bargain. He was ignored, then robbed, then cursed. His camel ran away, his shoes melted. He tried to sell his salt elsewhere, but it crumbled in his hands like sand. Fringe tale? Probably, but after what you saw today, you're not ruling anything out. You fall asleep dreaming of silent spaces filled with meaning, of hands offering salt like gifts, and gold dust shining in the moonlight like a whispered promise. The next morning, the ritual is gone, only footprints remain in the dust, and yet something lingers in the air, a kind of sacred residue, as if the trade etched itself into the space around you. As you move forward, you notice how salt isn't just traded, it's judged. Each slab has weight, shape, smoothness, and even smell. Traders pass them between fingers like glassware, sniffing, tapping, occasionally licking, though Bakari advises you against this. One slab you're handed is marked with a tiny etched symbol, a spiral. You ask about it. The trader says it's his personal mark, added with a goat bone chisel. If a slab with his spiral arrives broken, stained, or sold too cheap, it brings shame to his whole family. Another brick has a line carved through the centre. That one, the owner explains, was traded during a drought. A reminder to never forget the price of water. Even salt carries memory. You spot a brick wrapped in indigo-dyed cloth, tucked carefully into a satchel. Bakari whispers that it's not for trade. It's a gift, for a local imam who once helped a trader find a lost route using only starlight and stubbornness. Gifts of salt, you learn, are more powerful than coins. They can seal friendships, close deals, propose marriages, ask forgiveness, even heal rifts between tribes. One griot tells you of a feud ended when a woman brought a single perfect salt brick into the middle of a battlefield, placed it on the sand, and walked away. Both sides stopped fighting. The story ends there. It always ends there. Salt as truce. Salt as truth. You think about this silent bargaining again. How something so still could carry so much weight. How trust doesn't always need words. How sometimes all it takes is laying your value bare and waiting. That evening the traders celebrate. Not loudly, but warmly. Tea is brewed, music is played, a man juggles 3 chunks of salt and only drops 1. Everyone applauds. You're handed a small, polished piece of salt, your share of the day's trade. You thank them, tuck it into your pouch and promise not to drop it. Bakari grins. If you do, just blame the camel. Always a good fallback plan. The trail shifts once more, not in direction, but in mood. After days of hard sand, cold nights, and the faint paranoia of cursed trade, you finally spot something lush on the horizon. Palm trees waving in the wind, their fronds backlit by the golden light of late afternoon. You hear the hum of insects, the occasional splash of water, the unmistakable gurgle of camels speeding up because they know what's coming. You've reached an oasis. To the untrained eye it looks small, just a few trees, a spring-fed pond, and a scattering of tents. But to a caravan this far along the route, it's a miracle. The first thing you do is collapse onto a patch of grass, real grass, and close your eyes as someone hands you a wet cloth that smells faintly of salt and mint. You sigh, deeply, and let the tension slip from your shoulders like a heavy bag finally put down. This oasis isn't just a pit stop, it's a gathering place. Traders, locals, and travellers from other directions meet here like tributaries joining a river. You're greeted with cheerful nods and curious stares. Your clothes are dusty, your face is tired, your salt cargo is half gone, but you made it. The first order of business? Salt baths. Not luxurious spas, just shallow stone basins filled with brine from nearby springs. You sit in one up to your knees, letting the warm, salty water soak into your sore feet. It stings, then soothes. A boy nearby offers you a lump of soft soap made from ash, goat fat, and, you guessed it, salt. You scrub. You sigh. You start to smell less like a walking goat blanket. Progress. While you soak, the gossip starts. Apparently a caravan from the east lost its entire spice stock to a flash flood. One trader swears his salt bricks actually floated, which is highly unlikely, but makes for a great story. Another says a nobleman is paying double for red-dyed salt because his wife thinks it smells like courage. And then someone leans in to whisper about a traveller who tried to pass counterfeit salt, bricks mixed with plaster and crushed limestone, caught by a camel who refused to carry them. Too clever by half, someone mutters. Even the camels know better. You dry off and wander toward the food stalls. Yes, this oasis has stalls. Clay stoves crackle with skewers of grilled meat. Bowls of lentils simmer with crushed herbs. Piles of dates glisten with honey and flecks of salt. You grab a handful and nearly cry. Sweet, soft, sticky, and just salty enough to remind your tongue why you keep doing this. You pass a man selling small carved salt trinkets shaped like birds, supposedly blessed to bring clear weather. You ask if they work. When the birds don't melt, he says, it's a good omen. You buy 2. Later, you rest in a low tent draped in fabric dyed the colour of wet sand. Inside, elders sit cross-legged around a small fire, passing a clay pipe and discussing the usual things, camel breeds, trade taxes, and a recent marriage between 2 rival trading families, brokered with 10 salt bricks and a flute player. Apparently, the flute sealed the deal. Historians still argue how formal these trade oases were. Some describe them as casual resting spots, others as mini-markets with unwritten rules and a rotating cast of characters. But sitting here, sipping spiced tea with a bit of salt stirred in, it feels like a community centre for an empire on the move. You're introduced to a woman named Nana, the unofficial host of the oasis. She's been here for decades and knows every route, every caravan leader and every shortcut. Even the wind asks me for directions, she says with a wink. She shows you a map drawn on leather. It's simple, just lines, dots, and symbols. But you understand it. Each line is a route, each dot a stop. Some are circled, some crossed out. You ask why. She shrugs. Salt flows where it's safest. Sometimes that changes. Before you leave her tent, she hands you a salted date wrapped in mint leaves. For the road, she says, and for memory. You don't eat it right away. It feels like a charm. At sunset, the oasis glows. Fires are lit. Shadows stretch long across the sand. Someone is playing a drum gently, a beat that matches your heartbeat. A griot begins to sing, not a grand tale, but a soft lullaby about a man who carried a single salt brick across the Sahara, just to give it to the woman he loved. She threw it at him, then married him anyway. The crowd laughs. You laugh. That night you sleep on a mat beneath the stars, a gentle wind brushing across your face. You feel clean, fed, and, for the first time in days, peaceful. In your satchel, a few trinkets, a carved salt bird, a sweet date, a single coin, and a brick of salt that has travelled farther than some kings ever walked. Tomorrow you return to the dust and danger, but tonight you rest in a moment of stillness made possible by trade, tradition, and just the right amount of salt. You wake to the sound of rain. It's soft at first, a few drops plinking off palm fronds and tents, then more, a gentle percussion that turns the sand to mud and makes the camels grumble like old men who ordered sunshine and got soup instead. You sit up, blinking at the sky. Rain in the desert is rare and rarely simple. The oasis transforms quickly. Puddles form, tents sag, merchants scramble to cover wares with cloth and oilskin. And in the centre of it all a growing problem: salt doesn't like water. The traders leap into motion, stacking bricks under awnings, rewrapping bundles, digging trenches to divert flow. You help Bakari haul a heavy crate of Taghaza salt to higher ground. Even with all the precautions, you watch as one corner of a slab begins to soften, crumbling like stale bread. This, Bakari says through gritted teeth, is why we pack double. He's not being dramatic. Rain means loss, literal, financial and symbolic. The great irony: water is life in the desert, but water is death to salt. You learn quickly that wet salt fetches a lower price. Discoloured salt? Even worse. And sour salt. Salt that's absorbed too much moisture and smells faintly of mildew? That's basically garbage. Some say you can purify it by drying it in direct sun for 7 days and burying it with charcoal. Others just feed it to the camels and hope for better luck next trip. Historians still argue whether climate shifts or seasonal rains played a role in the decline of Mali's trade routes. But sitting here, watching half a dozen traders inspect their soggy inventory, you see the truth firsthand. 1 bad storm can ruin a month's profits. 2, an entire trade season. And if you think tempers run high over spoiled goat meat, try telling a man his salt bricks are now soggy doorstops. You drift through the camp, overhearing complaints, prayers, and the occasional joke. One merchant holds up a ruined slab and sighs, "Guess I'll sell it as soup base." Another grumbles that he dreamed of a crocodile last night. "Should have known. They always bring rain." A griot sings a snarky tune about a man who bought cheap salt, ignored the skies, and ended up with a pile of mush and a broken engagement. You find yourself helping cover a salt pile with woven mats, anchoring them with stones. A young girl hands you a chunk of clean salt from a hire stash. "Trade this instead," she says. "Hide the bad stuff, smile a lot." She's maybe 9 years old and already understands merchant diplomacy. As the storm clears, the damage becomes clearer too. One caravan decides to turn back early, its cargo compromised. Another stays to wait out the mud. Yours? You push forward, partially because your salt's still intact, partially because Bakari refuses to let a little weather ruin the route. "Salt walks," he says. "Rain jogs. We don't stop." Still, the mood has changed. The road ahead feels uncertain. As you trek forward through slushy sand, you notice something else. Talk of rebellion. Whispers float on the wind. Villages refusing tolls. Young men blocking caravan paths. Leaders questioning whether the empire's salt taxes are fair. One trader claims a market town revolted after being forced to trade its millet for overpriced salt. Another says a salt convoy was ambushed not by bandits, but by its own porters, tired of carrying loads while nobles collected profit. You ask Bakari if this is new. He shakes his head. Salt makes rulers rich, but people get tired of paying to taste their own sweat. Salt taxes were real, sometimes extracted in slabs, sometimes converted to gold equivalents, and while they kept the empire rich and the roads running, they also bred resentment. Too many taxes, too few returns. Sound familiar? There's an old saying Bakari repeats under his breath. He who taxes salt must guard his door twice. You stop at a small village for rest. It's quiet. Too quiet. The market is empty. The salt stalls shuttered. A few elders sit outside staring at your caravan like it's a visiting plague. One man finally speaks. "No trade today. Your tax collector came last week. Took the salt. Left nothing." You offer a small handful in goodwill. He doesn't take it. Just turns away. That night, around your fire, the mood is somber. Even the griot doesn't sing. The air tastes bitter. Not from smoke or stew, but from something heavier. You feel it in your throat. Salt is still sacred, still needed, but it's no longer safe, and you begin to wonder, can something that binds also break? As the stars emerge, you lie back on your mat, thinking of soaked bricks, angry villagers, and salt roads turning into fault lines. Tomorrow, you march again. But tonight, you listen to the silence between conversations, the way it settles, like salt in water, slowly dissolving into something hard to name. You leave the village in silence. No farewell, no friendly wave, just a handful of tight-lipped stares and a child tossing pebbles at your camel's feet. Bakari keeps his eyes forward. No stories today. Just dust, hoofbeats, and a growing awareness that the salt trail, once Mali's spine, is beginning to crack under its own weight. As the sun rises, so does the call to prayer. The caravan halts, and the traders kneel on flattened mats, their foreheads pressing gently to the earth. You join them, awkwardly at first, but with sincerity. The murmurs of prayer ripple outward like water, calm and constant. And when they're done, the silence that follows feels sacred. Then the debates begin. A visiting imam joins the caravan at the next stop, a man with an iron-grey beard and eyes that don't blink nearly enough. He rides a donkey and carries two things, a rolled prayer mat and a small satchel filled with salt bricks the size of river stones. You're curious. He opens his pouch and displays each brick like a relic. "These," he says, "were given to me in exchange for sermons. The word of God traded for the salt of the earth." You blink. He's not joking. He goes on to explain that Islam spread across West Africa, not only by sword or gold, but by trade, by caravans, by griots, by salt. In mosques from Gao to Niani, imams were paid in salt, their Quranic schools funded by the steady trickle of caravans bringing both goods and ideas. Historians still argue whether the salt trade merely enabled Islam's spread or actively shaped it. But standing here, watching the imam tie a brick to his saddle like a talisman, you get the sense that salt preached long before minarets echoed across the dunes. Later that day, the caravan rests in a town built around a mud mosque. Tall, elegant, studded with wooden beams like ribs. You join the afternoon prayer there, feet warm from the tile floor. Afterward, the imam delivers a short sermon, not about paradise or punishment, but about salt price gouging. You try not to laugh, but it's surprisingly gripping. The merchant who fattens his coin with stolen salt, he says, has spoiled both body and soul. Several traders shift uncomfortably. One quietly adjusts his ledger. After the sermon, you follow a group of scholars into a shaded courtyard where they sip tea and debate trade ethics. It's a blend of theology and commerce. Should salt be taxed the same in dry and wet seasons? Can a caravan leader accept gift bricks without counting them as payment? If a man uses salt in a wedding dowry, does his wife own it? One woman says, if she cooks with it, it's hers. Another argues, if he mined it, it's his. A third just sips her tea and mutters, salt never stays where you put it. Truth. You pass by a school where children practice reciting verses. One boy holds a tablet coated in blackened salt ash, used like a chalkboard. When the teacher corrects him, she rubs the verse away with a damp cloth and says, write again, but with more heart. Another teacher shows you an old scroll. It contains a list of Islamic legal rulings involving salt, everything from theft to storage. One ruling bans traders from hiding wet salt beneath dry bricks. That, she says, is deception of the highest order. Fringe detail. In some towns, salt had its own zakat category, a charitable tithe. Traders were expected to donate a percentage of their salt to the poor. Not gold, not grain, salt. Because salt, after all, saves food, preserves meat, keeps people alive. It's not luxury, it's life. You eat dinner with a local family, flatbread, salted lentils and pickled onions sharp enough to wake your ancestors. You offer to help clean up. The grandmother accepts. She teaches you how to scrub pots with a salt-soaked stone, saying it wards off mould and bad dreams. You glance at the polished pot. No dreams tonight, then. As you leave, the imam gives you a small salt tablet shaped like a crescent moon. For clarity, he says, and for questions. You tie it to your bag, next to your carved salt camel and date-wrapped charm. Your satchel is turning into a walking museum of Malian salt beliefs. That night, under a sky blotted with stars, the caravan gathers for tea. The imam sits beside the griot, and for the first time the two blend stories. The griot sings of Sundiata's journey, while the imam hums a prayer beneath the melody. The words rise together like salt in soup, subtle but essential. You lie back, hands behind your head, and listen to theology and folklore melt into one. Salt has never been just a mineral. It's been a sermon, a system, and a soul. And under the stars of Mali it continues to preach. You wake to the unmistakable sound of paddles, fast, heavy, slapping water like drum beats. Not the gentle glide of river traders ferrying salt. No, this is louder, urgent. You pull yourself upright just in time to see longboats slicing through the water, their sharp bows throwing up waves that hit the shoreline in wet bursts. Men with spears wrapped in dark cloth stand poised at the prow. Their eyes scan the riverbank. Their paddles strike in unison, perfect rhythm. The kind of efficiency born not of trade, but of war. Welcome to the Songhai Empire's revenge. Historians still argue whether the fall of Mali was slow erosion or sudden collapse. But one thing is clear. The Songhai did not wait politely for their turn. They took the river, and with it, they claimed the salt. The attack doesn't hit your caravan, not directly, but the message is clear. The Niger River is no longer safe. You and the other traders crouch near the trees as the longboats pass. Bakari hisses under his breath. Songhai warriors, see the red cloth on the paddles? They want us to know they're not hiding. They're not. They're sending a message. And just like that, the rules of the trail change. You learn quickly that the control of rivers meant control of the salt trade. Boats could carry more than camels, faster, with less wear and tear. But rivers were also easier to block, ambush or tax into submission. One village you pass now has Songhai banners hanging over its docks. Their salt weights are different, larger, flatter, stamped with a stylized fish symbol. You hear rumours that the new rulers are standardizing salt units across the region. No more personal carvings, one merchant mutters bitterly. It's all numbers now, we're turning into ledgers. You see it too. The local market feels tighter. More efficient maybe, but colder. Salt trades that once involved haggling, flirting and storytelling now happen in silence, overseen by armed tax agents. Bakari spits in the dirt. They call this order. I call it a parade with no music. At a rest station further downriver, you watch a merchant's ledger being inspected by Songhai officers. They flip pages, count bricks, measure sizes. One brick is deemed too light. The merchant is fined 2 more bricks. No appeal, no song, just numbers. Historians often marvel at Songhai's bureaucratic efficiency, but in the eyes of the old traders, it looks like the soul is leaking out of the trail. Later, you share a meal with a group of displaced Mali traders. They speak in low voices about Mali's fading grip, the fall of Niani, and the way salt caravans are now being rerouted to avoid Songhai checkpoints. They don't understand, one says. Salt doesn't like pressure. You squeeze it too hard, it crumbles. You ask what they'll do, one shrugs. Trade smaller, walk longer, go quiet. Salt finds a way. Still, it's not all bad. The infrastructure's improved. You pass a rebuilt bridge near a wide bend in the river, paved with baked clay and funded by new Songhai governors. The salt slabs travel smoother here. Easier, yes. But also more watched. There's a new tax on salt sold at river ports. Traders now need permits. Small wooden tokens carved with dates, names, and a seal. You hold one in your hand. It feels more like a leash than a pass. One fringe detail you notice. A salt inspector wearing prayer beads. You ask if he's an imam. No, he says. These are for patients. Respect. In the evening, you listen to the griot sing a new version of an old tale, this one rewritten for Songhai ears. It's about a hero who carries salt not to trade it, but to weigh it against the lies of a corrupt merchant king. He wins not with gold or cleverness, but with perfect accounting. Bakari rolls his eyes. That's not how the story goes. The griot just smiles. Depends who's paying for the song. The night feels heavier. You miss the chaos of Timbuktu's market, the laughter over salt brick dowries, the flavour of pickled onions and mango dust, the griots who sang with mischief, not math. But you understand, this is the new chapter of the trail, and salt, being what it is, adapts. It always has. That night, as you settle onto your mat, the river murmurs in the background, calm again for now, but the silence feels rehearsed, like a story being rewritten mid-sentence. You hold a small salt brick in your hand, old Mali's stamp on one side, Songhai's new fish mark scratched faintly into the other, a salt brick with 2 empires fighting for its voice. And you? You're the one carrying it forward. The Songhai banners are behind you now, flapping somewhere upstream, but their shadow travels with the caravan, stitched into every wary glance, every checked ledger, every salt brick tied just a little tighter. You've moved into new territory again. Different voices, different routes, but the same old game. Salt in, something else out. Only this time, the faces watching you aren't local villagers or tribal traders. They're strangers with maps. You hear their voices before you see them, clipped, nasal, some nasal and clipped, speaking in a strange hybrid of Arabic, Portuguese, and something else. They wear sun-bleached coats, wide-brimmed hats, and expressions that say they'd rather be on a ship. European. You're stepping into the era of colonial eyes and salt tax schemes. Historians still argue how early the European powers really understood the inner workings of West African trade, but you can tell from the way these newcomers stroke their beards and sketch in their notebooks that they smell something valuable, and they want to count it, regulate it, eventually own it. You pass a camp where Portuguese traders are inspecting a caravan's load. One man taps a salt brick and scribbles something in a leather journal. Another unfolds a map showing routes that haven't existed in decades, like someone trying to organise a beehive with a ruler. One of them asks if your salt is taxed under charter. You blink. He repeats it slower, as if you're the one making this up. Bakri steps in with a wide grin and says something polite in Mande that definitely means absolutely not. Go away now, please. These aren't your empire's rulers. Not yet. But they're watching. It starts with mapping, then come-offers, gifts of beads, wool, strange metal coins, then partnerships, then guards, then outposts. The salt trail, once built by footsteps and trust, now faces compasses and contracts. You pass a small coastal outpost where a European flag hangs limply from a post above a salt weigh station. The sign outside reads Customs House. Inside, a man with round glasses carefully inspects each brick, measuring its weight and scratching a number into a clay tablet. This salt is now taxable by decree. One local trader protests. "We already paid our tithe in Gao. We paid the imam." The clerk doesn't even look up. "Now you pay the crown." Simple as that. You step outside to find another strange sight. A scale with counterweights shaped like crowns. Fringe detail? These weights don't match any local system. They're standardized by force, not function. Later you watch as a group of salt porters, men who've carried bricks on their backs for miles, are told their load exceeds the legal quantity for non-licensed vendors. The fine? 1/3 of the load. Taken immediately. Bakari mutters, "They're taxing backs, not bricks." Still, salt finds a way. That evening you meet a woman named Fatimata, a merchant who smuggled salt past 3 checkpoints using painted gourds, hollowed and resealed with dried pepper paste to mask the smell. You ask her if she's afraid of being caught. She shrugs. "I'm afraid of my stew tasting bland. This is survival." You admire her salt gourd. She gives you a smaller one. "Hide something good in there," she says. "Not just salt. A story, maybe." You tie it to your satchel, which is starting to clink with every step. Salt beads, charms, ledger scraps, and now contraband cookware. At another camp, a French trader offers to buy your salt route rights in exchange for a sack of tools and a tin of chocolate. It's tempting if you've never tasted chocolate before. Bakari pretends to consider it, then tells him a fake route that ends in a swamp filled with hippos. You all laugh for 10 minutes after he leaves, but the tension remains. These strangers have no griots, no legends, no respect for the spiritual dimension of the salt trail. To them, it's profit, efficient, extractable, ownable. One griot you meet sings a new biting verse. They write our roads in ink, but the sand still shifts. They name our bricks in tongues, but the taste is the same. He smiles at you afterward. Let them draw maps. Salt was here before ink. Still, not everything is being erased. You visit a hybrid marketplace where colonial traders and local merchants meet on more equal footing. One table offers salt in Portuguese-marked sacks. Another displays hand-carved slabs beside books of Quranic verse. The trade is slower, but the conversation is cautious, not hostile. There's a sense of uneasy coexistence. A teacher at the market shows you a bilingual price chart, Arabic and French side by side. "They want us to learn their math," she says, "so we charge them twice." You respect the hustle. That night the wind picks up again, carrying the scent of rain and roasted millet. You sit near the fire, salt brick warming beside your foot, the sound of soft drumming echoing across the plain. Colonialism is coming, creeping, calculating, clumsy. But the salt trail still breathes, still remembers, and as long as people carry bricks on their backs, hide them in gourds, weigh them on calloused palms instead of stamped scales, the map doesn't win. The trail does. The road is quieter now. Not empty, salt is still moving, boots still press patterns into the earth, but something's changed. The gold has faded. The camel caravans are shorter. The drums are rare. But the salt? It's still here. You're in modern Mali now. Dust on your face, sun at your back. But the skyline ahead no longer belongs to kings or griots. It's cell towers, tin roofs, pickup trucks bouncing over potholes that follow the same curves as ancient trade routes. Funny, isn't it? The ghosts of trade are everywhere. You walk past a roadside stand stacked with salt blocks, not the polished slabs of old, but rough-cut bricks packed into burlap stained with fingerprints and diesel. A boy waves you over, offers a deal. 2 bricks for a bag of dried fish. The scale is digital, but the handshake? Still sacred. Historians still argue how much of Mali's ancient trade economy survives today. But here, with flies buzzing over sun-bleached salt, the answer is obvious. The forms have changed, but the function hasn't. You see a woman weighing salt with a plastic tub and a stone. No weights, just feel. She knows exactly when it's enough. Her fingers remember what her grandmother taught her. You pass a sign painted by hand on corrugated metal. Salt and airtime, recharge cards, plus table salt. A modern pairing. Buy minutes for your phone. Buy seasoning for your dinner. One preserves conversation, the other meat. You meet a truck driver named Makan who once worked a short camel route as a boy. Now he drives bags of salt south to Bamako. "The road is worse now," he says, "but at least I sit." He slaps the cab of his truck and adds, "This is my new camel." Fringe detail? On his dashboard, tied with faded red cloth, hangs a miniature salt slab carved into the shape of a camel. For luck, he says. For memory. You ask him if anyone still walks the old routes. He nods. Not many, but some. They say the camels still know. In a roadside cafe, you sip tea with two elderly traders. One shows you a ledger so old the ink has bled into the paper. Salt sales, names, weights, dates. Some lines are smudged with sweat. Others are marked with tiny fingerprints, proof of payment by touch. The man taps the page. This line here, that was the year of no rain. Salt was all we had. He pours you a second cup of tea, drops a single salt crystal into it and stirs with his finger. Just enough, he says, like the past. You visit a school in a small town. The chalkboard lists the day's lessons: geography, French, histoire du commerce. A child draws a camel in the corner and writes beneath it, "Sel pour la paix," salt for peace. You smile. Griots may be rarer now, but stories still move. Down the road, you pass a warehouse shaped like a rectangle, painted with a mural of caravans. It's a salt cooperative. Modernised, yes, but still handling bricks like offerings. Inside, workers weigh, sort and package slabs. One woman wears earbuds. Another sings a song that feels ancient. At a rest stop, you find a gift shop. Not your usual tourist trap. This one sells carved salt tokens, little replicas of the old bricks, now mounted on keychains. You buy one. It says, "From Taghaza to tomorrow." Bakari would have rolled his eyes. You head farther south and see signs of the old trail breaking up. Paved roads, market stalls stocked from China, not Timbuktu. Salt is no longer the king of commerce, but it's everywhere. In soup, in bricks, in memory. Still traded, still sacred. A man offers to sell you a packet of Mali gold, artisanal salt, locally harvested, sun-dried, bagged with care. You check the back of the package. It says, "From the desert to your table, taste history." You chuckle. They're not wrong. You talk with a historian in Bamako who gestures to a map. The old routes are faint lines now, barely legible. But they're under everything, she says. The cities, the villages, the phone lines, the tensions. Salt wrote the first infrastructure. She pauses. You know what we say here? When salt leaves the tongue forgets, but the land remembers. You leave her office thinking about memory that doesn't live in books or dates, but in habits, handshakes, family recipes, in old men who still tap bricks like drums to hear if they're good, in songs hummed by truckers who've never touched a camel. That night, in a small guest house, you lay out your satchel. A carved salt bird, a gourd charm, a moon-shaped tablet, and that one last brick. You place it beside your bed, just in case. Salt still matters. It always will. Because it's more than taste. It's more than trade. It's the trail itself, a path carved by footsteps, winds and whispers, still pulsing under Mali's skin, and in your bones too. The fire is low tonight. Not dying, just gentle, like it knows this is the last one. You sit cross-legged, your salt brick warm beside you, its edges dulled from the long journey. Around you, the caravan sleeps or stirs quietly, bundled in cloth and dreams. The night is still, and the trail behind you stretches long, dunes and rivers, books and camels, songs and salt. This is the end of the road, or maybe the beginning of something quieter. You remember the first night standing beneath a moonlit sky, unsure whether you'd make it out of Taghaza with your feet or sanity intact. The sound of camels groaning, the taste of salted tea, the whispers about ghosts and gold. The moment it hit you that this wasn't just trade, it was empire in motion. Salt did more than seasoned stew. It paid teachers and healers, bought wives, war horses and wisdom, built mosques and markets, bound oaths, ended feuds, spoke in silence, sang through griots. It crept into every corner of Mali's glory, through the cracked lips of miners, the calloused hands of porters, and the careful ledgers of kings. You think of Mansa Musa, robes glowing, salt beneath his sandals, of Timbuktu's libraries, paid in salt and protected by shadows, of silent trades where trust spoke louder than words, of Osis blooming with gossip, pepper and salted dates, and then of the floods, the rebellions, the inspectors, the inked fingers of outsiders trying to rename what never asked for their words. The trail tried to bend, It even broke. But it never disappeared. Because salt doesn't vanish. It dissolves. It merges. It remembers. Historians still argue whether salt made Mali or Mali made salt famous. But out here, wrapped in your blanket, staring at a fading fire and holding a chipped relic of the past, the answer feels simple. You carry it, all of it, in your satchel, in your footsteps, in your veins. The trail may quiet, the bricks may crumble, but as long as someone walks the route, offers a handful in trade, hums a tune with Taghaza tucked in the verse, the story continues. So you lie back, gazing at the stars, those same ancient specks that once guided camels across oceans of sand. You listen to the breathing of those around you, the wind brushing over the dunes, the deep, contented exhale of a nearby camel, maybe even your own. Your last thought before drifting off is not of salt or maps or history books. It's of a child crouched in a modern market tracing caravan routes in the dust with a finger, humming a song they don't know the words to. But the tune? It's right. Because salt doesn't need lyrics. It just travels. So now, the fire fades, the trail narrows, and your breathing slows. You've walked through golden empires and ghost towns of salt, past riverbanks that once whispered prices in gold dust and dunes that echoed with the footsteps of 1,000 hooves. The noise of trade, the cries of market wives, the soft scrape of books opened beneath mud brick roofs. It all drifts now, like salt caught on the wind. Let it drift, let it settle. Your muscles, tired from the long march, begin to soften. The tension in your brow eases. The weight of the past, so rich, so layered, unfolds and spreads out like a blanket, tucking you in with stories older than your bones. The road ahead is calm. There are no taxes to pay here, no debates over grain weight or caravan speed, just stillness. And you, held in a quiet where even the camels sleep. You feel your breath deepen, slower now, like the pulse of the old trail, steady and sure. The stars above watch, patient and kind, the same ones that once guided griots and generals. The air cools, the earth cradles, and the salt remains. A quiet witness to everything that came before. A gentle reminder that you too are part of something long, winding and wise. So sleep now. Dream of maps that move, of songs that weigh more than bricks, of rivers that remember. You've walked far enough. Let the trail rest beneath you. Let the salt keep your story safe. 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 Keep your story safe.